We are doing February-March 2025 paper 2-2. And in this 15 mark question, they are saying that we have a 1D array that is called member ID, which will store the unique membership code. You guys know unique membership would mean that no duplicated values, which automatically means that we'll have to use some sort of a conditional loop here. Even if they don't ask you that you have to use a conditional loop, it should be understood at this point. Then there's a 2D array called name, which is used to store the name of the club members. The first and the last name of each member will be stored in separate array elements, which tells you that there would be 2 columns in this 2D array. Then they're saying the system can store details for a maximum of 1000 members. So there would be a total of 1000 rows, right? We're just labeling it as we do the question. Then the position of any member's data is same in both arrays. Okay, and then there's a variable new ID which is supposed to input a new membership code. So you're supposed to use this variable. Here we have the highlighted names now. Okay, now first of all, let's look at the visualization, how it would go like. So we'll have a 1D array called member ID where we'll have the membership codes. So these are some examples of the membership codes. And then any index that is unused would be an empty string. Secondly, they're saying that there's a 2D array called name. So in the 2D array, we'll have 2 columns. We'll have the first name, last name, first name, last name, first, last, etc. all the way till 1000 rows. And then they said that the mapping is same from the same indices on both arrays. So if I'm talking about this membership XY tetra 9, then I'm referring to their first name and last name. Similarly, if I'm at index 5, I'm referring to the row number 5 with column 1 as their first and column 2 as their last name. Okay, now the question is saying that you have to provide a menu. Okay, now whenever the word menu is used, that means you can either use functions and procedures, or you can use simple conditional loops. It's up to you. So we have done the previous question with functions and procedures. This time we'll do it using conditional loops. That offers the choices in
इसमें case
so inputting a member, outputting a list of the membership codes, and the first and the last name. Okay, so we're supposed to allow the user to input the new values. Let's say we input a new code. Let's call it CS 1000, and then we'll have the name, maybe CS, and maybe let's call it computer, and let's call them science. We'll be able to input into the both arrays, and then we should be able to output all the values of the array. Now there is a keyword here called validator response. Again, validation means that you have to use a conditional loop and you'll keep on repeating until the input is reasonable. When inputting a new member, input a new membership code and check that it contains 6 characters. That means we have to use one of the string handling functions, which in our case would be the length function. Then they're saying if the code is 6 characters, then we will check it against all the previously stored membership codes to make sure that it is unique. Okay, now this is literally just a linear search, but it would be done in the opposite direction, or you can do it in normally as well. So let's say if I am going to input a new member ID, let's call them CJ1902. Now I cannot place this ID directly into the array. First, what I have to do is I have to get this input and I have to do a linear search starting from the first index till the current position, which is right now 6, or technically it would be till 5. So is this equal to CJ? No, no, yes, which means since the value is duplicated, now I cannot store this value, so I'll ask the user to input a value again. Next time they input MN9292. We'll start from the first index. Okay, this is again duplicated, so we are not going to allow it. And maybe lastly, I input Z88, something like this. And then since this is not duplicated, it is perfectly fine if I write this into my array, and then my index, which would be pointing at index 6 currently, will move to index 7. And this will keep on happening until we have 1000 values. One thing also worth noticing here is that if any index is unused, and since this is a string array, the indices would be represented by an empty string. And if you come across a single empty string, then that means all the items after that are going to be empty because we are storing values one after another, right? So you're not going to like skip any of these indices. So let's say if you have 3 values and the fourth value is empty, that means you can skip all of the values till 1000 rows because there is no more value after this. This is the basic visualization of the program. Now we'll start writing the code. A new code must be entered and checked. We have discussed this. If the code is unique, then it is stored in the first available space, and the new member is required to enter their first and the last name, and then they're stored in the corresponding array. That would be a 2D array. We've already discussed this. And then when outputting the list, output for each member their code, first and last name, and then the program will continue until the stop option. Okay, you do not need to declare anything. Assume this has been done. You do not need to initialize anything. Okay, since that is written, so we don't need to set it to all to empty, but let's assume that is not the case. So now we'll start writing the code. Let's assume that the arrays that are given to us are not initialized. So what we'll do is we'll have to initialize them. So for row or for R1 to 1000, I'll go to each array. The name of the array is member ID current row, and we'll set it to an empty string like this. And let's start. Or if we have to initialize this 2D array as well, so this will be name current row. Then we'll have column 1, which will be set to empty, and we'll do the same thing for the column 2 because both of the array have string values, and we'll do next star. But this is optional, we don't have to do it, at least in this question. All right, now we move on to writing the actual part. So what will be the structure of this question? They're saying that there's supposed to be a menu, and menu will allow 3 options: inputting a new member, outputting the list, and or stopping. So there's supposed to be 3 options here, and we'll write the outer part of the code first. Okay, so let's do the repeat until. You can use a while loop as well. Repeat until choice is equal to, let's say, 3. I'm going for integer input because it's always easy to deal with integer values. Okay, and first of all, I'm going to ask the user. I have to validate the input. So I'll add comments at the end. They clearly said that the validation must be done. So I'll check output, enter choice, 1 for new member, 2 for list of complete list image, and 3 to exit program. And then I'll ask user to input this, and I'll input this into choice. And then this will keep on repeating. So there would be another loop here now, repeat, and this would be indented until choice is greater than equal to 1 and choice is less than equal to 3, right? So if the user inputs 5, then this loop will repeat. If the user inputs -1, this loop will repeat, so on and so forth. Now at this point, user would have inputted an appropriate choice has been input at this point. Okay, now what will we do? So now there would be 3 conditions. If choice is equal to 1, then else if choice is equal to 2, then, and else if, or simply else, if, or maybe else if choice is equal to, okay, we don't have 3 here, so yes, that's it. And then we'll have end if. This would be the outer structure now. And everything will be done inside of this. Okay, now when we input the first choice, that is going to be the one where we ask the user to input a value. And first of all, we have to check if the length is equal to 6. If it is not equal to 6, a new code must be entered and checked. So we have to use another repeat until now. So if repeat until, and we're going to keep on asking the user to input until the length of the, okay, now where are we going to store the ID? The ID is supposed to be stored in this new ID variable that is given to us. So we must use it for full credit. So new ID until the length of new ID is equal to 6, like this. Okay, until that is the case, we'll keep on asking the user to enter member ID in the format is maybe XXX 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, we're just giving them the idea that it must be something like this. And until they get it right, we will keep on asking the user to input the ID again and again. Okay, now once the loop ends, at this point we'll have the correct new ID with 6 characters at this point, right? So you can see there's a lot of conditional looping here. Okay, now once we have the ID, then the question is saying that you are supposed to first check if the code is unique. And like we saw, that whatever value you're supposed to input, you're not going to input it directly into the array. You will first get it in a variable, then do a linear search till the current index. So you'll have the value of index. Wherever the last value was stored, it will initially start from 1. And if the value does not exist, that would be one condition. Or if you come across any empty space, that would be the second condition. Or the third condition would be we have seen all the 1000 values in the array. So this is how we're supposed to do it. Let's store it in the current ID. This is just a variable that I'm making. And we are supposed to have an index now. Okay, we need to set the value of index. So let's set the value of index here. In fact, it's going to start for the first time here. Index, I'll set it to 1. And for now, I'm assuming unique to be true. That yes, by default, we'll assume that any value that we're going to add into the array will be unique until we come across a duplicated value. And I'm going to place an ID we got, that is the new ID. And let's get the ID out that we placed. So the name of the array is called member ID, and I'll get the value from the current index. In fact, let's call it ID for simplicity. Right? So for now, let's say the user inputs mn929 and everything else is empty so far. So in my current ID, I have this value mn929 and index is set to 1. All right. Now I'm going to ask the user to do a linear search whenever they input a value, whenever they want to add a one. Okay, by the way, whenever we have to add a new value, index should not be set to 1 because it will keep on resetting to 1. In fact, so I need to place this outside, right? So what will happen is every time I would need to place a new value, it will not start from the last index. It will instead reset it to 1. Keep on resetting it to 1. So all the values will get stored at index 1. So I'll do it outside the loop. So every time that the user inputs a new value again and again, it will continue from the last index that was given to us. Okay, we're assuming that unique is set to true and we have the current value. Okay, now we run a while loop or a repeat until. Let's use a while loop here, although you can do either of them. Okay, while the current ID is not equal to empty, which means that there is some value here. Like I said, if you come across any empty value, that means you have reached all the empty strings till the end of the array. So we don't need to look further. 1 or unique is equal to true. So while the value is currently unique, that is fine. We'll keep on looking until the value becomes a duplicate. Second condition, or the third condition would be that index becomes greater than 10,000. Why? Because this is the maximum length of the array. So again, we come across the space. We'll stop the loop here. Okay. Secondly, maybe the array is already duplicated at some point, so we'll stop there. And then if we come across the last value, then we'll also stop here. So 3 stopping conditions. Again, you can do it in any other way you'd like, but this is going to be the main logic. Now we need to get the current ID of the member. So in fact, let's do this inside the loop. So we get the current ID every time. Okay. Now, once we have the current ID, which is stored at the last index we have. So now we have to make the comparison from the first index, right? This is the current ID. Current ID is stored at, let's say, index number 4. This was the last stored value. Now we have to make a comparison against all the values stored in the array. So maybe let's call the new variable j. Okay, it's a simple for loop variable. And we'll set the j to 1 here, right? Okay, now this is the loop variable to iterate through all values in array for linear search. Okay, this is different. J and this index is basically the global index variable for the array pointing to last value to where last value was stored. This is very important to know the difference. Index is going to point to the last value wherever it was stored. In this case, it would be pointing to CS1000 like this. and then j would be pointing starting from 0, and j would only go till these indices. So index -1, this is where j will go to, right? Because we are comparing all the values using a linear search. So we have the current ID here, and now we're going to compare. I'll say if the current ID at any point is equal to, by the way, this should be set to j. We're starting from 1. So we're starting the comparison from the first index, and we'll compare it with the current last stored value. Okay, if they both match, if current ID is equal to new ID, so for new ID, yes. So the value is not unique, right? We have come across a duplicate, so I'll set unique to false, and I'll do endf, and I'll simply go j is equal to j plus 1, which means I go to next index and continue linear search like this, right? Okay, now when the loop ends, there would be 3 conditions. Either we would have come across an empty string like this, or we would have come across a value that is finally unique, where we have seen all the rows, we have seen all the 1000 rows, and then the values are finally unique. So we are assuming unique to be true initially. If at any point in current ID does not match the new ID, then unique will remain true throughout. So let's say if I want to add ABC000 here, so 000, I'll compare it with all of the values. Since it is not matching with any of them, I'll place it here, and unique remains true. It never gets set to false. So this is how the while loop will function. Now, once the while loop ends, like I said, we have to now figure out if it was unique or not. For that, we'll check it against the variable unique. Okay, so what have we done till this point? Once the loop ends, like I said, we would have definitely terminated the loop because of either of these 3 conditions. So if unique remained true throughout, we will check it at the end. We are checking after the loop if unique was true, and like we discussed, unique will be true if none of the duplicate happens. And then if that is the case, I'll assign the new ID to wherever the last index was pointing to. Okay, so now the index was pointing to index 5, let's say in this case, and we are storing the value at index 6, so we should increment it by 1 first, and then we store the value. So we'll do index equal to index plus 1. It gets pointed to 6, and then we store the value here, whatever value we had, let's say ABC 999. We store it here, and then now index is pointed to 6. And then in the next part, we are asking the user that they have to input their name, first name, and the last name. So whatever they're inputting, I'm going to store it at the current index, row 1, column 1 and column 2 of the name array. So now we're asking what is the name, your first name at row 6. I'll go and I'll place your first name. Maybe this is Alpha and maybe this is Brown, something like this. And then we place the name at row 6 of both of the arrays. And then we simply end this if condition if the value was unique. Okay, so if the value is not unique, what will happen is we will go here, and then this menu will repeat. Do you want to input a value, yes or no? And this will keep on happening again and again, again and again, again and again, until they get a value that is actually not a duplicate, right? Okay, then we go on to choice 2. In choice 2, it's very simple. They're saying you just are supposed to output all the values that have been inputted by the user. Okay, now till what point are we supposed to output? That is going to be defined by any empty space in your array. So if you come across any empty string, that means all the remaining values will be empty. So you don't need to look further. You'll just print the values till this point. And that is what I'm going to do. I'll set j to 1 here again. We can just reuse the variable, and while the member id current index j is not equal to empty, we'll keep on repeating and while, and every time we'll output their member id from the member id array index j. The name is member id, yes. Then we'll output their first name. First name will be in name array current row j column 1, and then output their last name. Last name would be name current row column 2, like this. And then we simply end the while loop. So it will print all the details until we hit an empty space, which would be in line index 5 in our case. Let's make these empty for now. So it will print mn, aa, bb, ad, 1, 2, 3, 4, cj, and then xy. And then it will stop because there's nothing to print after this. And then lastly, in the question, they're saying that you have to stop when the user asks you to exit the program. So we have choice set to 1 here, then we have choice set to 2 here, and then if the choice is set to 3, the loop will automatically end. And then at the end, we also need to give the choice to user to input again. Okay, we've already done that. So maybe when they input 3, we should also print something, and if value other than 3. So else maybe output. I think we checked it in the start. Wait until invalid option, choose from 1 to 3 again, and here we do endif, and this will keep on repeating, right? So let's do a quick walkthrough of it once, hoping that it works correctly. We are asking the user to enter choice between 1 to 3. Maybe we input 1. Okay, so then we're checking if choice is equal to 1. We're going to ask the user to input member id until it is of length 6. Once that is the case, we are assuming that the value is unique. We're setting our linear search index to 1, and we are checking while the current id is not empty or unique is set to true, or the index value is not greater than 1000. We'll keep on comparing the current value with the next value, and then we stop eventually when one of these conditions become true. Then we check if unique was still set to true because it was initially true, and then even after the whole loop ran and this condition never became true, this current id is a new id, so unique will be true. We'll know for sure that the value is unique, so we'll store the id at the last available index by incrementing it 1 into it first. Then we input the names into both the columns of the 2D array. And if that is not the case, if the choice is 2, we simply output the values. And if that is not the case, if choice is some other value, we endif. And then let's say if user wants to input again, so we go all the way back up and we keep on repeating this again and again, again and again. And this is the complete question.